I remember that day vividly, the air thick with tension as I sat at the dinner table with my parents, my heart beating heavily against my chest. The kitchen was filled with the familiar sight of the family table, its polished surface reflecting the warm light from the ceiling fixture above. On the table, dishes brimming with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a colorful medley of steamed vegetables stood as silent witnesses to the brewing storm. The sweet scent of the food wafted through the air, a middle class meal that my mother had prepared with love, yet it felt like a heavy weight pressing down, almost suffocating. My family was like any other. We were a lively bunch, our lives intertwined through sports. My two younger brothers played baseball, their shrieks of joy and disappointment from countless games echoing in my mind. Our weekends were filled with games and cheers, the sweet scent of popcorn filling our home as we cheered for their victories with much enthusiasm. Those moments felt like magic, harmonizing our hearts in a shared love of competition. But me, I had always been different. I loved tennis, the elegance of the court, the thrill of the match, the way it felt to hold a racket and serve aces, that satisfying swish as the ball flew just over the net. The agility of the game, the strategy it required, brought a sense of freedom that felt worlds apart from my brother's baseball diamonds. My parents supported my passion, always driving me to practice, their encouragement sounding more like duty than enthusiasm. Yet their love came with strings attached, whispers of expectation entangled within their praise. Though I played at a community college, my journey was far from easy, the drive toward my dreams constantly overshadowed by the responsibilities of life. I found myself juggling two part-time jobs, the clatter of dishes from the diner, where I worked often making its way into my thoughts about serving aces on the court, all to help pay for my rent under their roof. I felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, molding me into someone I was not. I felt trapped, suffocating under their dreams instead of discovering my own. The recent US Open had become the catalyst of our conflict. My parents buzzed with excitement and rapture each evening around the dinner table. Their chatter filled the room, from match predictions to favorite players, their voices harmonizing in eager anticipation of the event. But as each invitation to join them washed over me, a wave of resistance filled my chest. The thought of sitting there, sharing that space while feeling so detached, caused my heart to clench. My mother's disdain for certain players had always been a point of contention, especially for one athlete in particular, Serena Williams. I could never understand why she hated her so much. My memories of her resentful rants replayed in my mind like an old movie, smudged by blurred emotions. I could hear her voice, sharp and piercing, objecting vehemently to Serena's passionate outbursts, claiming she was a disgrace to the sport and a poor role model for black athletes. Each critique felt like a stab in the heart, draining the joy out of watching tennis together. Instead of fun and excitement, those evenings became marred with tension, a chasm opening deeper with each few words. My mother always preferred players like Venus or Coco Gauff, pivoting the conversation to their strengths, glossing over the struggles and victories of trailblazers like Serena. As I grew older, it became increasingly difficult to share the same excitement for the sport I once loved. It felt like watching a film I used to enjoy, only now I was too aware of the forced narrative, the loudness of biases that echoed over the soundtracks of triumph. With that week's excitement building around the upcoming US Open, my frustration reached its peak. Enough was enough. Why did I always feel like an outsider in my own family during their cheer and jubilation? It was time to speak my mind. I could feel the tension in the room as dinner stretched on, each past dish feeling heavier than the last. When I finally declined their invitation to come and watch, the atmosphere shifted instantly. My father's eyebrows knitted together, a classic sign of disbelief and disappointment. My mother's lips pursed into a thin line, setting against the background of joyful expectations, her face transforming into that familiar mask of frustration. Mia, why would you refuse something so special? She asked, her voice soft, yet tinged with disbelief. I hesitated, the words racing to my lips, but my hesitation spoke volumes. I could see my mother's irritation grow, her fingers tapping against the table, counting seconds that felt like hours. The nervous energy in the air was palpable, and for the first time, I felt like I was wearing my heart on my sleeve. Because it has become unbearable to watch sports with you, Mom. I can't keep doing it. My voice trembled as I spoke, the anger clawing at my throat, but the truth poured out like a dam bursting. It's not just about watching tennis. It's how you speak about certain athletes, how you make it personal. Your political biases poison every game. You don't respect them simply because they live their lives unapologetically. I watched the silence swallow my words whole. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw understanding in her eyes, perhaps even a glimpse of discomfort, but it was quickly replaced by the storm brewing within. Mia, you don't understand, she snapped, cutting through the thick tension like a knife. You cannot just ignore how they represent themselves. It's not good for the sport. Her voice raised, filled with fervor, igniting the heat between us into a scorching flame. It's not about the sport, Mom. It's personal. You can't see that. I could feel my pulse racing, the shame bubbling within me as the argument escalated. My father watched silently, his expressions too complicated to read, but the muscles in his jaw were tight, and it felt like I was tearing the family apart over a simple disagreement. I just wish you would support the players who deserve it, like Venus or Coco. They uphold values, they represent tradition. Her words dripped with disappointment, but my spirit rose up, fueled by righteous anger. Support doesn't mean blind allegiance. Those statements, that vitriol, it turns every game into a battle instead of a celebration. You can't do that and claim to enjoy the sport. My hands balled into fists as I leaned forward, my heart racing with the exhilaration of finally standing my ground. The tension in the room surged, ancient resentments clawing their way back to the surface as we bickered about values, beliefs, and biases. My voice echoed off the walls, breaking through unspoken fears, and for a moment the home I once cherished felt foreign to me. Eventually, the argument exploded, hurtful words filling the air like knives thrown wildly in anger as emotions surged. My mother brought up failing grades and poor decisions, her words like stones shattering against my pride. I countered with the injustices I had felt growing up, how my passion was always overshadowed by preferences. You don't respect my journey, Mom. Win or lose, it's mine. Each jab seemed to widen the chasm between us, our voices uncomfortably close to yelling, and the cold realization sunk in that our family ties were fraying before my eyes, echoing an age-old familial dispute, this time centered around the sport that once united us. I felt the tightness in my chest tighten further, the reality of the widening rift between us hitting me like a tidal wave. The warmth of the family table, a place once filled with camaraderie and love, now stood as an arena for conflict. As the argument reached its peak, my father finally broke his silence, his voice strained with an authority I had never seen him wield before. Mia, this disrespect cannot continue. If you refuse to join us for the US Open, there will be consequences. We will no longer split your tuition. His words struck me harder than any blow. My heart dropped, my throat felt dry, and a dense fog of despair enveloped me. Tuition was my main line to my dreams, the only thing that had kept me afloat. They had taken the one thing that meant so much to me as a student, and I was left standing at the precipice of despair, staring into an uncertain future. My parents' faces were locked in an expression I had never seen before, cold and resolute, as if the love that had shaped my childhood had vanished into thin air. My voice came out as a whisper, "You can't mean that." But I knew deep down this was a reality I couldn't ignore. The weight of my life felt heavier than it had ever been, and I couldn't help but envision how this erroneous decision would echo through my life, feeling permanently tethered by their ultimatum. Suddenly, the frustration that had built up inside me gave way to determination, a fierceness ignited I had never felt before. If they wanted to play games with me, I would play them harder, turning the tide in my favor. I could not afford to stay trapped in their expectations. No longer would I allow the fears and biases that filled our dinner table to define my love for the sport I held dear. As I retreated to my room that night, I can still remember feeling the pulse of anger gripping my heart. I was resolute, the fire within me burning with a clarity I had never experienced. My journey was mine, and I would rise above this. The night wrapped around me, a silent promise of vengeance coursing through my veins. As I looked out of my bedroom window, the stars twinkling like the dreams that still danced on the edge of my ambitions, it became clear. This was a war, and if they wanted to match my resolve, they would soon realize I wasn't one to go down without a fight. The air buzzed with excitement. The smell of roasted coffee and freshly baked pastries weaving a comforting embrace around me as I stood behind the counter of the local cafe. The familiar sounds, the gentle chime of the doorbell, the humming of the espresso machine, and the laughter of regulars, wrapped around me like an old, warm sweater. I could feel my heart racing, each beat echoing the anticipation that was now a constant companion. I was no longer just a waitress, I was on a mission. As I cleared empty plates and filled coffee mugs, my mind was lit with a flicker of hope and determination. Mia, you okay? My coworker, Sarah, asked, her brow furrowed with concern. You seem a little out of it today. I forced a smile, brushing the worry aside. I'm fine, just thinking about school. Truthfully, it was more than just school. It was about proving, in that brave, unyielding way to my family, that I could forge my own path, that I was capable of more than the limits they set for me. Each table I served became a small stepping stone, reminding me of the countless hours I had poured into a routine designed to fortify my future. That relentless drive kept my spirits buoyed, even as the weight of my long days felt insurmountable. I remembered the countless late nights spent hunched over my textbooks, the sharp scent of coffee mingling with the faint whiff of laundry detergent from the clothes I wore to the cafe. I have exams coming up, I had told Sarah, but inside I felt sparks of rebellion, fueled by the bitter dismissals of my parents. The hours I worked, the sacrifices I made were cathartic. They transformed me from the girl who felt small under the shadow of their expectations into someone resolute, someone formidable. Later that night, I returned home, fatigue pulling at my eyelids, but I was electric with purpose. I dropped my bag on the floor and shuffled to my room, my sanctuary filled with textbooks and dreams. The walls echoed with memories of their cutting remarks, voices that had lingered in my mind for too long. You should focus on your job, Mia. College isn't for everyone, they had said. The resentment washed over me like a tidal wave, but I turned it into a stepping stone. I'll show them, I murmured to myself, determination coursing through my veins like fire. It was more than a proclamation, it was an oath. The sun dipped below the horizon as twilight swept in, draping my room in soft shadows. I slid down on my bed, a sea of crumpled notes and sticky notes surrounding me, reminders of the late nights spent learning, memorizing, and pushing myself beyond my limits. I set my alarm for a few hours of sleep, just enough to stave off exhaustion before waking up to repeat the cycle. You can do this, I whispered into the silence, hoping it was my own voice that would reassure me. Days turned into a blur, each moment a symphony of work and study. I gained a rhythm as I juggled shifts, relying on 3 cups of coffee to fuel me in the early mornings and late nights. I took pride in serving customers, each interaction reminding me why I was doing this. You're back again, huh? I would say cheerfully to regular customers, who came for their daily dose of caffeine and comfort. Each smile and laugh became a brick in the wall I was building for my future. With every plate cleared, I visualized my parents' smirks shifting to bewildered awe, and it became sweeter. Yet beneath the surface, there lurked an undercurrent of anxiety. I could see my tuition bills looming ahead, tangible and menacing, a countdown of the financial obligations that had previously chained me. I often lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, counting the costs, evaluating my progress, and wondering if I could pull it off. Just a few more shifts, I reassured myself. You can do this. My friends reached out, their concern gnawing at me as they invited me out for movie nights or dinners. Mia, you need a break, they said, their faces full of playful worry, but I couldn't afford to slip into their carefree moments. Just one more month, I would reply, masking my turmoil with a bright smile. I promise I'll join you soon. But the more I distanced myself from them, the more my heart ached. I was wading through a thick, oppressive fog, the bitter truth lodged like a stone in my throat, unsure how to release it without drowning in the depths of betrayal and fear. What is it that makes people unworthy? I pondered somberly. Was it how much money they had, the profession they chose? I had always believed that those who continued to follow their passion were the real achievers, not those who simply dissolved into mere expectations. The day finally came when my sacrifices yielded the fruit of my labor. I looked at my bank account, refreshingly full, a sight that made my heart race with elation. I took a deep breath, giddy with the realization that I had genuinely saved enough for that semester's tuition. I was ready to confront my parents and reveal my hard work, my blood, sweat, and unimaginable late nights. I envisioned their reactions. I could already feel my heart fluttering with nervous excitement. It would be like a thunderclap, tearing through the stale air of ignorance and regret that had hung over our interactions for far too long. The sun dipped lower, painting the world in reds and oranges as I clamored to gather my family around the table for dinner. What's going on, Mia? My father asked, eyeing me suspiciously, his fork poised in midair as he speared a piece of chicken. I was determined to keep my tone steady, even as the waves of anxiety crashed over me. I have something important to share with you guys. My mother paused, her gaze narrowing at once intrigued and apprehensive. What is it? You know we have a busy week ahead. Her words stung, a reminder of their hurried lives and my stifled place within it. Just hear me out, please. I exhaled steadily, gathering courage, each breath fortifying my resolve. I worked really hard over the last few months, and I built a plan to pay for my tuition. My voice wobbled slightly, but I pressed on. I saved enough money, and I will pay for it all myself. Eyes widened in disbelief, a flicker of astonishment overtaking their usual nonchalance. The silence that followed felt like a thick fog rolling in, suffocating and mysterious. What do you mean you paid for your tuition? My mother asked, her voice tinted with uncertainty. How? I took extra shifts, I pressed, the words tumbling from my lips like a torrent. Worked at the cafe and took online courses, sacrificing so much just to show you both that I can succeed without your help or your limits. I proved it to myself. I watched their expressions twist from confusion to incredulity, disbelief morphing into something deeper. Mia, that's not a reasonable decision. My father's voice was firm, defensive, just as I had anticipated. You could have talked to us about it. I shook my head, feeling the fire within me grow, and be met with your dismissals. Your constant reminders that I would never be good enough. I had to do this for myself. The temperature in the room shifted, the tension pooling thickly around us as silence painted the walls in shades of unease. My mother's eyes were glossy, perhaps from belief or perhaps anguish. Mia, she started, but I pressed on. I had waited long enough to let them dictate my value. I would no longer let their doubts bundle themselves around my identity. The moment hung delicately in the air, a tightrope walk between acceptance and misunderstanding. Don't you realize what this means? I could feel my heart pounding like a drum, each beat pounding out my hopes and fears. It means I am more than what you think I am? A tremor of vulnerability coursed through me, amplifying each second as I stood before them, bearing my soul. Their expressions shifted slightly, coldness evaporating into something softer, something rich and pensive. I had expected anger, shock, even disappointment, yet as I watched their faces, I saw no scorn. Instead, I saw shadows of doubt morphing into understanding. You did this all on your own? My father finally asked, the incredulousness in his tone stirring something within me, a glimmer of victory. Yes, I proclaimed, the rush of emotions spilling over me, illuminating my path. Every sleepless night, every ounce of struggle, it was all for this moment. The silence returned, pregnant with a truth that could shift the very foundation of our family dynamics. I watched their coldness melt away, their expressions blending shades of surprise and reconsideration. I could see it dawning on them, the realization of labor that had permeated my existence, and I couldn't help but smile. Perhaps this was the moment I had been yearning for, the moment that would shake loose their limits and give them a glimpse of who I truly was. The atmosphere in the dining room was tense, almost suffocating, as I stood there, an inconspicuous figure against the walls that once felt suffocating. It was almost as if the air itself conspired to hold my breath captive, forcing me to confront the heaviness of the moment. My parents' silence was so thick it could be cut with a knife, every heartbeat echoing in my ears like a drum calling me to battle. Everything seemed vivid, a sharp clank of the fork as it slipped from my father's grasp, the faint scent of the evening dinner still lingering around us, perfumed with anxiety. Their plan to leave me in despair, to see me crumble under their harsh words, had backfired completely. Suddenly, all the hurt and shame that had kept me small for so long transformed into a powerful energy, whipping through me like a gust of wind, unleashing a storm. I could feel my heart race, exhilaration firing through my veins, propelling me forward as if I were a dandelion seed being blown into the wind, with a fierce determination to grow. I had gone from being a daughter they believed would falter amidst their criticism to a fierce beacon of strength they never anticipated. Silence followed after my declaration, the kind of silence that fills the air after a thunderstorm, heavy and electric with energy. This was not the moment of my demise, this was my rebirth. My mother's fingers trembled slightly as she clenched her fists, each knuckle a bemused testament to her withering control. I watched her search for words that eluded her, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, a pained expression knitted tightly across her face. My father's eyes narrowed, disbelief washing over his features like a bitter tide, threatening to drown the anger he had always directed at me. They did not know what to say, nor could they muster the disdain they had fashioned for me so easily before. Aye, my father stammered, the once commanding voice wobbling with uncertainty. You cannot be serious, Mia. Disappointment dripped from his words, bile rising in his throat, and yet I was unfazed. No, you don't understand, I said, my own voice louder than I'd intended. I took a step closer, feeling the heat of the moment magnify as if I were a magnet pulling their emotions towards me. The smell of old wood and polished china filled the air, grounding me amidst the chaos I was creating. I've spent my entire life fighting to be seen, to be heard over the noise of your expectations. But this time, I am not asking for permission. I've earned my voice and I will use it. Surprisingly, the emotional tension began to crackle between us like turbulent waves, threatening to break upon the shore of our shared history. They had undermined my spirit for years, treading heavily on my dreams, but I was resolute. Here I stood, unyielding and determined, like a tree rooting itself deeply in the earth during a storm. The saturated silence swirled around us, heavy and charged with the electricity of my resolve. I could see my mother's expression morphing, a slow transition from anger to realization, her fingers unclenching slightly as the sharp lines of her anger softened. You think you know everything, she spat, but her voice lacked its former bite. It trembled, betraying a crack in her armor just as I hoped it would. Do you really think that? I challenged, my voice not wavering as if I was etched in stone. I have seen it through your eyes for too long. I know you want the best for me, but your best has turned into nothing but suffocation. All your plans, your dreams, whatever they are not mine. I am not here to fulfill an image you have painted. I am here to paint my own. With every word I spoke, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. It was intoxicating, like the euphoria that meets the dawn after a long, oppressive night. I had fought their expectations and reclaimed my power, even though I knew this battle would not end quickly. I was prepared for the fray. My mother visibly recoiled at my words, the confusion to be met with such force etched into her brow. We want what is best for you, she insisted, though her voice wobbled, clearly struggling to regain her footing. You are throwing away your life? Is that what you think? I threw the words back, crushing them under the weight of my newfound strength. I thought you would support me, celebrate my choices. But every time I tried to express who I am, you dismissed me with anger. Dismissed my dreams and aspirations like they were nothing but vapor. I am tired of living in your shadow. My father stood rigid, his facade of authority cracking under the pressure of the truth I was revealing. He was stunned, barely able to form a coherent thought, frozen in disbelief as if I had landed a blow he had never seen coming. You are my daughter, he finally said, though it was more of an observation than a declaration. You need to respect our family lineage. Family lineage. I echoed, incredulous. You mean the lineage of broken dreams and unfulfilled desires? That's what you want from me? Each question was a vinegar soaked dagger, cutting through the fabric of their expectations, slashing at years of manipulation and control. I will not live a life dictated by fear. I will not be confined by your stringent vision of success. For all the times they had belittled my dreams, here I was, a warrior against oppression, fueled by the burning ire of months spent wallowing in their disdain. I felt a surge of satisfaction blossom within me, blooming like a fierce wildflower in the dead of winter. I had thrown open the doors to my soul and refused to let their darkness snuff out my light. They were the ghosts now. I was the living reality, filled to the brim with fierce ambition. Their pride was slipping away in real time. Watching it fade away was exhilarating. I could see my father wince at what he considered rebellion, the sparkle in his eye now dull, smothered by a shadow of uncertainty. For the first time, the foundation he built of expectations seemed shaky, and I could sense his trepidation. You're making a mistake, he mumbled, almost as if he were trying to convince himself rather than me. No, I said firmly, tired of his trying to push the shame back into me. I'm making my life my way. If you cannot accept that, then it is you who have made the mistake. The air crackled with change, an unsteady current of shifting ideologies and what ifs, the unease palpable. My mother opened her mouth, perhaps to issue a warning, but hesitated, searching my face as if looking for something buried in my resolve, something soft enough to tear down what I had built. I know this hurts you both, I continued, voice ringing with clarity I hadn't expected to possess. But it is the truth. You spent my childhood building me into an image you deem precious, but you never paused to ask me who I wanted to become. I deserve respect, not judgment. I deserve support, not scorn. With each word, I was breaking free from the chains of disappointment that had long held me captive. The flicker inside me erupted, igniting a fire that would ravage everything in its path, including their misconceptions. The paralyzing silence between us began to resonate with possibility, the fierce warmth of my newfound strength melding against their icy hostility. I could feel my mother's gaze waver now, her bravado slipping like sand through her fingers, those carefully constructed walls of denial rattling against my determination. Mia, she began, her voice softened, losing the venom that had so often accompanied it. You are so young, you cannot throw your life away because. I shot back, the warmth of my courage buoying me forward. Because it does not fit your narrative? I spent years chasing after dreams you found acceptable. I molded myself so tightly to those expectations, only to realize they were never mine. I refused to wear a guise made of your approval any longer. The sound of my words hung in the air, heavy but liberating. Feeling invigorated, I pushed further, as if I could drive a wedge between their concept of who I should be and the undeniable truth of who I really was. I will carve my own path. This, standing here before you, is the beginning of me. The tide shifted. The once rigid line of my parents' shoulders began to droop, their own certainties wavering under the weight of my steadfastness. I could see that my father was beginning to reconsider, viewing me not just as a daughter, but as a complex individual with dreams and desires of my own. We sat in silence, the air heavy with the change I had ignited. The shadows of their anger dancing with the flickers of doubt transformed the dynamics of our relationship, slowly sculpting a different version that could be birthed from this confrontation. I was eager yet nervous, unsure of where this would take us, but knowing that I was standing on the threshold of something undeniably significant. As I stood there, the flames within me flickering but unwavering, I knew all too well that my journey of rebellion was finally making an impactful statement. I felt liberated, elevated, and terrified, understanding the immense weight of my declaration, but unwilling to let it crush me. I was the phoenix rising from the ashes, ready to soar into the unknown, fueled by the truth that unleashed my very soul in the days that followed. Our home felt different. The cold, oppressive air of contention and resentment lifted like fog succumbing to the sun's warm rays. Each morning, as I walked down the familiar hallway of my childhood, I could feel the air crackling with a newfound energy, one that echoed the changes rippling through my life. There was an unfamiliar peace that hung in the corners of the house, mingling with the remnants of past arguments and disapproving looks. I had shed their grasp like an old skin, and the very realization brought me such comfort that I occasionally caught myself smiling for no reason, as if the world around me had suddenly taken on vibrant hues I had never noticed before. My head was held high, firm like the golden rod, waiting for the gentle nudge of spring to unfurl its petals. You did it, I whispered to my reflection one morning in the mirror after a long night spent studying. It was a revelation that anchored my heart with pride. I was no longer the crumpled version of myself, buried under the weight of their expectations. No longer was my life defined solely by my family's harsh judgments. My path lay before me, a beautiful, winding road sprinkled with the glimmers of possibility. This time, I moved with intention. My days at school transformed from overwhelming burdens into a colorful canvas for self discovery. Not only had I reclaimed my tuition, I felt as if I had reclaimed my spirit. With each class I attended, I found myself diving deeply into the lessons, grasping them with fervor that had long lain dormant. My once muffled voice, so often drowned out by shouts of criticism, now rang loud and clear, reaching out to teachers and classmates alike. Mia, your insights are surprisingly profound, my English teacher remarked after I shared a perspective on a novel during class discussion. The words were a warm embrace, wrapping around me and fortifying my sense of self worth with golden threads of affirmation. Then there was my new passion for tennis, a flame that flickered and threatened to extinguish under the weight of my family's doubts. Rediscovering my love for the game felt like tasting the first bite of a long forgotten dessert. The aroma of ambition filled the air around me as I practiced relentlessly at the local courts, sweat glistening on my brow, every serve a celebration of my reclamation. I could almost hear the encouragement of my friends ringing in my ears, their laughter and cheers energizing me during every match. The pressure that once gripped my heart loosened day by day, and my muscles moved with newfound efficacy. With each swing of my racket, I could feel the tension releasing, transforming into pure joy. It was during one of those practice sessions that I overheard a small group of classmates gathered on the sidelines, eagerly discussing the upcoming community tennis tournament. Have you heard? Mia is competing, one voice exclaimed, excitement making the words leap from her lips. My heart skipped a beat, the thrill coursing through my veins. I had never envisioned myself competing in front of an audience, yet the idea elicited a sense of exhilaration rather than dread. The stakes were high, but now I embraced them, ready to seize this opportunity. Come on, Mia, you should totally enter? Another friend called out, her eyes twinkling with sincerity. They had become my biggest cheerleaders, their faith in me stood as a wall of support I could lean against. We know you can do it, you just won an intense match against Kelly last week. I could already feel the nervous butterflies becoming an army ready for battle inside my stomach. I think I will. I replied, grinning widely, the thought cascading like soft sunlight across my mind. That tiny moment marked another significant turning point. I would not let fear stand in the way of my aspirations any longer. The day of the tournament arrived, the sun smiling down upon us, casting golden light upon the green courts. It felt like my spirit mirrored the bright sky, every blade of grass shimmering in anticipation, coaxing me forward into the fray. I stood at the edge, clad in my favorite tennis attire, my heart pulsating with excitement. The familiar grip of the racket was reassuring in my palms, the weight of it a reminder of every ounce of hard work and dedication that had led me here. You've got this, Mia, my friends shouted as I practiced my serve, their voices wrapping around me like a protective shield against my doubts. Thanks, I really feel like I could take on anyone right now. I replied, the vitality in my spirit soaring higher than ever before. It was remarkable how far I had come. Just weeks ago, I barely saw any step forward that didn't leave me feeling crushed beneath others' expectations. But now, the prospect of competing was a celebration of liberation. The crack of barriers breaking free had made room for me to stand tall, to embrace my passion without hiding in the shadows. As the tournament progressed, the atmosphere brimmed with energy. The crowd roared each time I eagerly smashed the ball over the net. And as I rallied back and forth with my opponent, I was not just engaging in competition. I was igniting a fire within me that I had assumed was extinguished forever. Every winning point tasted like nectar, sweet and fulfilling, erasing old memories that once tainted my connection with the sport I adored. I couldn't help but smile, my heart racing with every step. I was playing not just for victory, but for every moment that had marginalized my worth, overcoming every shadow cast over my ambitions. Game, set, match. I heard the referee declare after an exhilarating final rally, and everything around me blurred into jubilant noise. As I shook hands with my opponent, the adrenaline coursing through my veins surged with excitement. They stood wide-eyed, full of respect, but I found myself beaming, surrounded by friends who cheered louder than the keenest spectators. I could feel their pride weaving a tapestry of warmth that wrapped around me, a striking contrast to the icy judgment I had endured for so long. I was proud. No, I was euphoric, but the celebration was short-lived. Just days after that exhilarating day, a text message arrived that sent my heart plummeting into the depths of uncertainty. We would like to meet and discuss things. My mother's words loomed heavy on the bright tapestry I had woven, stitching tight the remnants of dread I thought I had outgrown. My stomach dropped, and I felt the familiar knot twist and tighten, leaving me gasping for breath as I read the message again. What new challenge lay ahead? A wave of anxiety crashed against the buoyant confidence I had meticulously built. No, not now, I thought, my mind racing. I stared at the screen while panic spiraled in my chest, each thought grasping for control. Would it be another round of accusations? More cutting remarks disguised as concern? Just the thought of sitting across from them again chilled my blood, sending shivers coursing through me. Yet I was ready to face whatever they would throw at me. I had transformed. I had risen. I felt emboldened like never before, burning with a resolve that could only be birthed from conquering one's demons. My breath steadied, my heart echoed with the reassurance that I had weathered storms and emerged more defiantly intact. No matter what shadows linger behind me, I murmured to myself, the road ahead is mine to pave. And it was true, I had turned the chapters of my story, each curve like a brushstroke, painting my own destiny against those who thought they could suffocate my pursuits. Revenge might not always be loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper in the quiet moments after battles when you realize your own strength. Touching the screen one last time, I took a deep breath, ready to confront their whispers with the volume of my newfound silence. The thoughts of expectation no longer wrapped around me like chains. Instead, they drifted away like leaves caught in a gentle breeze, leaving only the solid ground beneath my feet and the unyielding warmth of my own spirit.